Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 43 of my 2022 reads. This week I read a bunch of different fun SFF across a lot of different SFF subgenres, and I DNF'd a book that I really didn't expect to. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I finished Fluff 2 by Raven's Dagger. I had recently read Fluff and loved it so much, and I just could not help but pick up the sequel, even though Fluff 2 isn't actually available in ebook form. It is available to read kind of chapter by chapter online, so I will link that below in the description box. Both Fluff and Fluff 2, by the way, you can actually just read chapter by chapter online for free, but you know, I find ebooks easier, and I wasn't sure I was going to do this, but I just wanted to read the sequel so much, and I'm so glad that I did. This was so much fun. I absolutely am loving this series, and it's just such a surprise because this is, you know, a self-published lit RPG. It's just totally not the sort of thing I would normally reach for, but I really love the writing in this. And Fluff 2 I thought was even better than the first Fluff. It's kind of expanding on this world of superheroes and villains, where our main character Emily, you know, had just started college and found out that she got kind of villain powers, and she doesn't want to be a villain and she's trying to avoid that. But in the second book, she's getting more and more drawn into this world because now she has all of these sister summons, and that's expensive to feed everybody and clothe everybody, and she's realizing she has to start making some money. And so she gets drawn further into this world and is dealing with kind of all of these bigger forces at play. There's this thing called the Cabal, which is some sort of shady organization that is dealing both with heroes and villains and seems to be after one of her minions. She's gathering more and more minions as well, not just her sister summons, but also like human minions or like superpowered masks minions. So it's just like the kind of development of her character as well as she grows into this leadership role. It's just fascinating. I love the discussions of kind of villainy versus heroism, all these sorts of things, and it's just so cute and so fun. So I absolutely loved this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I will have a series review for Fluff up later on, maybe next week. We'll see when it gets out. Next, I read Spy x Family Vol.6 by Tatsuya Endo, translated from Japanese by Casey Lowe. This is another great installment in this series. This series is just so much ridiculousness and fun. It's basically set in a Cold War style of place. It's kind of fake names and everything like that, but it's a Cold War style spy type of story. And we follow a spy guy who is really talented, and he gets a fake wife and a fake daughter to infiltrate a kind of elite academy so that he can get access to a political person who's very important. And he doesn't realize that the fake wife that he's kind of gotten is actually an assassin, and the fake daughter that he's got is actually a telepath. And so there's just so many antics. This has that kind of ridiculous fun feel. This kind of installment has a pretty big storyline at the beginning of it for maybe like the first half, which is him and a colleague doing sort of like tennis match, underground tennis battles. Reminds me a little bit of like Ranma 1/2 in terms of the way that it's like almost a sports manga type of thing for this section of the storyline. And his colleague is somebody who like has a big crush on him. So that part was like a little over the top at times, but then some of the later stuff has Anya, the daughter, just so cute. I really love all the storylines with Anya. So yeah, this was a fun installment. Maybe not my favorite so far in this series, but I had a good time. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Daughter of Doctor Moreau by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is her newest release, and it is sort of based on the ideas in The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is kind of a classic sci-fi type story. And she does what she always does, which is takes a really interesting twist that is very feminist and also really focuses on like Mexican history. So this is set in the Yucatan Peninsula. I think the end of the 19th century perhaps, and it is focusing on Carlota, who is the daughter of Dr. Moreau, who's this French guy who has come to Mexico and has set up this house in a very isolated place where he does these experiments, kind of doing human-animal hybrids, very unethical stuff. And it also has a perspective in this book of Montgomery, who is an English guy who comes to be sort of a caretaker and handle things around this ranch. And so it's kind of following both of them as things progress and as the experiments progress and as some outsiders come and sort of threaten the status quo. So I think that this book is, which I expected, a little bit too violent and has too much body horror for me. I actually expected the body horror to be a bigger issue, but actually for me, the violence was the bigger issue. This story is pretty slow and gentle throughout most of it, but the last maybe 20-30%, there's quite a lot that happens and a lot of violence and death, like a lot of people die. And that's just a little bit much for me. But other than that, I thought that the feeling of atmosphere is always something I love in Silvia Moreno-Garcia's writing, and I really just felt that atmosphere of this isolated place and the kind of slowness of their days. It was really beautiful, and I loved all of the themes and the discussions. There's so much in this, just talking about kind of colonialism and talking about exploitation of people, especially Native people and workers, talking about the desire for independence versus this colonial mindset of, you know, we are bringing civilization to you. And the main character, Carlota, you know, she's somebody who has been raised by this doctor to be very obedient, and it's her story of growth into independence. And so yeah, like really interesting themes, really interesting characters. I love the atmosphere, but a little bit violent for me. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, but if you're interested in this, definitely check out the review that Cynthia at BookWhimsy did for this. So I will link that below, and I think it's really good to watch. Then I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a book that I've had on my radar for a couple of years because I'd heard good things about it. And recently I've seen even more people kind of picking it up, and I thought, you know what, I'm in the mood for some more fantasy romance. After reading Mages of the Wheel, I'm just like, that's what I want to read right now. So I picked this up. It is set in Regency England, and this is a Regency England where magic and fairies and things like that exist, even though most people don't really have any interactions with them. But we follow a main character, a woman who has lost half of her soul when she was a child. A fairy came and stole it. And so that means that she doesn't really have full access to her emotions. She's really struggles to feel anything strongly, and often just gets very distracted and can't stay in the moment and doesn't react as expected and doesn't really pick up on social cues and these sorts of things. So she's really not fitting in society, but her cousin is going to go have a season in London, and she goes with her and meets the Lord Saucier, who is basically a kind of court magician, and he has a lot of powers, and ends up trying to work with him to see if he can help fix what's going on with her missing half of soul, but gets caught up in a lot of the kind of social work that this guy is doing. And so it ends up being very, very much about issues of poverty and kind of social inequity that's going on in London at the time. Like, that's the real focus of the story, as they also are falling in love. So this, I thought, was like a lot of fun as a romance novel and as a fantasy novel. I liked the mixture of magic and Regency. I'm big on historical romance and also big on fantasy, so I thought that was cool. All of the stuff dealing with the Fae was really neat as well. I think that for me, there's a little bit of humor in this that goes a little too silly for me. And also, I loved the social justice themes here, where it's really like kind of examining the characters doing stuff like going to workhouses and seeing how people are treated and all that sort of stuff. But it takes a slightly different lens than I prefer. Like, there's a lot of focus on individual charitable work and stuff like that, rather than focusing on more structural changes or kind of collective efforts at change or empowering those who are most disadvantaged. It kind of focuses on these nobility people and their charitable it works, if that makes sense. And sometimes the characters shame other characters for not being good enough activists, so not donating more of their money or caring more about their family members and their friends than they do about the poor, those sorts of things. And I just didn't like that shaming aspect. But even so, I thought that this was like a really fun read, cool world building, and I liked a lot of the themes. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I've already started on the next book. And then I did have one DNF, which is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. And this was a total surprise to me. I was listening to this on audiobook, and I really thought that I would end up loving it because I've heard amazing things about it. Kazen at Always Doing, who I'll link below, like absolutely loves this, her favorite book of the year. This won the BookTube prize for nonfiction. It's got amazingly high ratings on Goodreads, and I really liked sort of what this book is doing. So I definitely recommend this book for you if you want to give it a try, because it's doing some really cool things. Basically in this, Clint Smith is recounting going to all of these different historical sites and looking at the ways that we talk about America's past with relation to slavery, and talks about kind of how these things are presented, what the history actually is, what the history of the way we talk about it is, and really describes his experiences going there, as well as interviews people who are visiting the site, interviews tour guides, interviews historians, all sorts of things. So it's really this very interesting and intricate look at how we talk about America's slavery past. So all of that is really awesome, but I think that the kind of narration style of this was just not working out for me, probably partially because I picked this up on audio. So I got about 27% into this book, and I found that I kept increasing my audio speed because I kept being like, okay, let's keep going, let's go, but I was a little impatient with it. And I finally realized, like, there's no reason why I need to do this to this book. I don't need to treat it as an obligation. So I stopped reading it, but I really don't think it's bad. It's more just that the writing style was making it very hard for me to stay engaged. And I think that part of that is that this is really poetic. Like, a lot of the descriptions are incredibly vivid, but maybe a little too flowery for me. I find that sometimes with certain authors, such as like Catherine M. Valente, the writing style is so flowery that I can't even really concentrate on what is being said because I'm so distracted by the words. And I think on audio that's even more pronounced. So, you know, for example, he would go someplace and he would spend paragraphs just describing the way that, you know, the light hit the floorboards, or, you know, like that kind of description. And I think that if that is working for you, it's just going to be a really immersive, beautiful experience. But for me, I just found myself very impatient, and I just kind of wanted to get to the point. And I think that's not the point of the story. I think that this book really is more about the immersion in the experience, and the info in it was really cool, but I just got so impatient with it. So it ended up not being for me, but I really think that that's not going to be the case for most other people. So definitely still worth picking up for pretty much everybody else. Okay, that is everything that I read and DNF this week. If you guys have read any of these, if you're interested in them, if you want to chat with me about them, or if you want to let me know what you've been reading this week, I would love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.